Hello friends, Matt here from theshavingcadre.com. I'm going to be doing some honing videos and a shaving video tonight. This is video number 1 in honing this George Butler keen razor. This is a razor that was produced post 1891. It's made in Sheffield, England, and this company's been around since 1765, or it was around since 1765. I believe it made it up until the 1950s. It'd been acquired multiple times. But George Butler is a really cool company, known really well for their key razors and their they've got some Bowie knives, and of course their wonderful Shakespeare-themed razors as well. But I'm going to go ahead and get this honed up tonight. It is a 5/8 plus half hollow. I'm going to be using a Naniwa 1K, 5K, and an 8K. And I may, depending on how the bevel is, because this thing probably hasn't been honed in somewhere around 100 years, who knows, I may use my Atoma 400 to refresh my, my bevel setter here, my 1K. And then once I'm done with that, I should be transferring over and I will finish the razor on a JNat slurry. I'll use a probably a set of, probably a Majiro. I'll attempt my Coma. I've been struggling with the Coma a little bit. I think I'm just getting bigger grain sizes than I should out of it, but we'll try the Coma, and then we'll finish on Atoma Nagura on my Azuko Asagi base stone. So I'll go ahead and get started. I've already wetted the stone a little bit. It doesn't really need to be wetted too much. It's kind of a splash and go, these Naniwas. They're pretty great stones. I've never had any issues with them. Way better than what I started on. I started out honing on a King 1K, and let me tell you, you can get some good edges off of a King 1K, but it is definitely slow. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with just for a baseline. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and dull my edge. I'm going to kill my edge. I'm going to drag it across the stone here. Do it a couple times. Gently across the edge. And so that edge is killed. It will not cut a tomato at all. All right. And so, I mean, we may have some issues with this. It is an older razor. It looks like it's got a decent bevel. It looks like it's a little heavier in the front. Looks like they honed it toe heavy. There's some hone wear up there. But we'll go ahead and attack that. Now I want to take a moment just to mention that I do these videos almost as a free-form journal. And if you learn something from them, that's awesome. If you have questions, I may be able to answer them. Please do ask. If you have criticisms, keep them constructive if possible. I'm always learning every razor. So I'm going to go ahead and do the burr method. That's my preferred method for setting a bevel. I do not tape, by the way. I come from the school of adjusting your bevel all the way through. So I'll change the bevel on my heel, or excuse me, on my spine and on the toe, or excuse me, apex at the same time. I prefer to do both at the same time. I have so many razors, I prefer not to try and think of which one is taped and which one wasn't taped. And so, anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to do, just to start with, a 25 half stroke round on one side of the blade to start with, and then we'll switch over, okay? So, with pressure. Okay, so that's 25. And now I'm going to feel to see if I can feel a burr on any part of this edge. And I am starting to feel a burr right in the center here, right in the center. So I'm going to give it another 50 because it's not touching anywhere toe to heel. All right, so there's 50. So that's a total of 75. And I always keep track so that I can do a similar number on both sides. All right, and at this point, I'm starting to feel that there is a burr kind of extending to most of the way to the heel. Probably a fifth of the blade is not touching, but I can feel a burr all the way up, close to the toe, but not all the way. So we're at 75. I'm going to give it another 50, and I think we should be there. Stone's getting loaded up already. I had some folks ask me in my last video why I don't flatten my stone in the middle of my honing video, and that's because I know that the stone will slow down, but I also don't want to have to stop my video to go take care of that. I don't have multiple video cameras running, so. All right, so that should be 125 total. And I'm feeling a burr now over the great majority of the blade. I think we just have just a hair more at this heel and just a hair more at the toe. I'm going to do myself a favor. I actually read about this a little bit. I hadn't used this method much, but I'm going to go ahead and use a little Sharpie. I'm going to give myself a little bit of ink along the edge. I don't usually do this, but just to make sure that I'm getting it. So, if you can see there, little black line on the very edge there. Might be kind of hard to get it to focus. But yeah, it's there. All right. So I'm going to do another 25 just to see where we're at. All right, so that's 25. So that's 150 strokes, half strokes we've made. And looking at the razor, kind of exactly what I was thinking. We're still about a fifth or sixth of the blade right here that we're not touching. And the toe, we're not catching it because we're going to have to do rolling axe strokes to catch that toe because it's uplifted. So I'm going to do a little bit more work on the heel, and then we should call it a day. So I'd say we'll be at about 175 to 200 total. I know some people say, oh my goodness, for a razor with that little hone wear on it, you should not need to do that many strokes. Well, depending on the razor, depending on how it's handled, I mean, I'm not for certain that this razor was ever used. Or if it was used, it may have been honed by a barber that used different methods. Could have been convex honing it back in the day. We do not know. So if we need the extra effort to get there, we're gonna take it now. There we go. Looks like I got it there on the heel. And maybe just a little bit more. I'll just give it another 25. And there we are. Yep. I've got it pretty well up all the way to the very heel now. And the toe is very close. So I'm going to go ahead and dress the stone just a hair. Clean it off. That worked all right on video. I was wondering how that would work out. If I didn't have this old bar mat, I don't think I'd even try to do that. All right, so we're at about 200 strokes the other direction with some pressure, not a ton. So let's go ahead. Didn't think about how my hand's going to be in the way here. I'm going to stop at 80 and just check and see where we're at. We may have that. We may have it all the way back on the other side, so let's just check. Yeah. I do see there's a small little chip in the blade on the toe, so we're going to have to work that out with the X strokes. Looks like the bevel's pretty close to where it will be. I'm going to go ahead and do the marker test. Why not? On this side too. Just to say I did my due diligence. I marked the wrong side. That's funny. Okay. So that's 100. And just taking a glance, we're still missing about a quarter of the blade at the heel and just a hair at the toe, so it's actually much better, so that's good. And I'll confirm with I'll do another 50 strokes and then we'll confirm. Okay. So that puts us at 150 strokes. The other one was at about 220, 225. Feeling a good burr now on the opposite side. We are missing the heel a bit, but I think we're going to have to get some of that with the rolling X strokes. But we do have a pretty decent bevel, or excuse me, burr, all the way up and down. I'm going to give it another 25, maybe a few more, try and work on that heel a little bit. And I'm going to try and take this tiny little micro chip. There's a tiny little chip out of the toe. So I'm going to use a little bit more pressure, and we'll get rid of that real quick. All right. It's actually closer to 50, I think. And yeah, it looks like we've got the burr pretty well up and down the blade now, even all the way down to the heel on this side. Feeling pretty good with that. We're going to go ahead and start lightening up the pressure, and I'm going to work the other direction, cut that in half, and continue on. Okay. clean this stone off just a hair, make it a little faster. This is one of the reasons I hadn't really dressed the stone in the middle of the videos, because it kind of slows me down quite a bit. I can work through the slowness there. All right, should be about 75, or excuse me, 125, pretty close. And I lightened up the pressure significantly there. And I'll check the bevel, or the burr. Very solid burr, all the way up and down, except for the very, very end of the heel and the very toe, because we're gonna have to catch that with our rolling X strokes. Okay, stop at 50 and I'll do a little dressing real quick. Have a little sip of bourbon too. It is Bourbon Heritage Month. Having some Old Forester 1897 tonight. Fine, fine, fine spirit. Give it just a hair more on the heel. I'd say that does it. All right, and then we're going to cut that in half again, so we're about 125, so probably go 160-ish. Okay. Go the other direction. Okay. And just check to make sure we get a good burr. We shouldn't have to check at this point anymore. It is there. Okay. I'm just cutting my strokes in half every time. So I'm at 15. All right. And we should be now down to X strokes. We have a nice looking bevel. Looks good. It just needs some good X strokes and we'll get there. I'm gonna go ahead and dress the stone again. And we'll do some X strokes with pressure. And then I'll lighten up. And then we'll move on to the 5K and we'll just run on down the road pretty quick. Now that we're mostly there. As I said before, I mean, some guys use tape, some guys don't use tape. I've never been into using tape too much. I don't besmirch anybody that does, especially if you're doing a wedge or something along those lines, big old wedge. But for me, I just prefer to stay away from it. I've got too many razors to try and remember which ones I've taped and which ones I haven't. And this is a rolling X stroke I'm doing here, guys. Just varying my pressure from heel to toe. I'm gonna take a look here. Looks like our little chip is gone. I'm gonna just verify that with the loop. I'm sure it is. Yep, we've got a clean bevel, up and down. Looks good. We're gonna go ahead and continue on with some X strokes until we get there. Start lightening up, hitting some of these X strokes. We're pushing water up and down, no problem undercutting the water. Pretty sure we're there. I'm gonna give it another 15 for good measure, and then we will check the edge with a tomato and call it a day. Probably even check with our thumbnail test too. We'll see if it wants to grab. All right. Beautiful looking bevel. It's nice and even now, up and down. Ooh, I did not see that. We do have a tiny chip here on the heel. I'm gonna give a little effort on that to try and get rid of it real quick. That's unfortunate. I didn't even see that earlier. Just caught it with the shine off the bevel now. That's really close to being gone now. I'm gonna give it another 50 on this side and maybe start cleaning it up from there, and then we'll have to go back to rolling X strokes. Yeah, it looks like we're really close to being there. Okay, take a look at it under the loupe. Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, sometimes you can see them things. I think I missed it because I had put marker on it and I just could not see it. I think the marker had it covered up until those X strokes revealed it. It's still dealing with a little bit, just a little bit. I mean, it's right there. It's about maybe a quarter of the bevel. So we just have a little bit more work to do. That's frustrating, but that is honing for you. None of these vintage razors are perfect. You're always going to find one that's got an issue. Almost every one of them, if they're vintage, has one. You just don't know what it is yet, and that's all right. Some people might work on the slurry. I prefer not to. I mean, it might make it a little bit faster, but it just gets all over the razor. Okay, that should be really close to getting it out of there. It's got to be very close. Let's check. There we go. It is gone. I'll do a little reduction, clean up this edge, do some more X strokes, and we'll move on. Boy, this is running a lot longer than I was hoping, but it is what it is. Go ahead and lighten up a little bit. Okay. Now let's start going much lighter, and we will check to see if we hit a bevel. We should have. Taking out those little chips, I mean, that really took some time, but We've got a nice even bevel now up and down the blade. It looks good. I'd say it should take a pretty dang decent edge. Okay, feels like the bevel is set. Let's go ahead and do a little test. Let's hope so. So let's see here, tomato test. Cutting off tiny little pieces. All the way to the heel, pretty much. I mean, the very heel, it's a little slow, but I can live with that. But all the way to the toe, we're cutting just perfectly. Very good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and swap up the stones. I'll clean up this 1K later. I usually make sure they're dead flat right after every session, but I'll just go ahead and toss it right here. Won't hurt anything there. In my opinion, it's always better to just spend the time on the 1K. If you're feeling something's not there, if you notice there's something that's not 100%, just spend the time. I'd much rather spend a lot of time working on my 1K and make sure it's right than spend 2 or 3 times as much time going through a full honing progression, and then what do? You get to the end and the shave is terrible. What's the point? I'd much rather just spend the time, get it right the first time. And you know what? I don't always get it right every single time. Sometimes there's a warp in the blades. Sometimes there's other factors that you're not catching, but it's a learning lesson every time. So have another sip of some Old Forester. Get going. So I hadn't really planned on showing you guys how to remove chips, but sometimes you have to use a little bit of brute force to knock them out. All right. So I'm going to start with some pressure, mostly toward my heel because I could tell there's just a hair that I might need toward my heel. But for the most part, I'm going to go ahead and just do a standard X stroke here. I'm going to do some half strokes to start with, maybe 25 to 50 half strokes with a little bit of pressure, not much, but then I'm going to really back off of it and finish it out. I am going to kill my edge real quick and start over. Well, not completely over. I'll kill that edge and I'll join it back up with this edge. So all right. back to the X strokes. I'd say we brought that bevel right back up, or rather that apex right back up. I knocked that apex down so we can join it back up here and make sure that it's 100% set. Sometimes it's a little rough coming off the 1K. I don't know what the science is behind that, but I seem to always have a better bevel in the long run if I knock it down at the 5K. I actually should probably read on that. Again, this is my journal. I'm not here to 100% teach people exactly what to do from start to finish, but maybe I'll come back with that next time. Already looking super shiny. A lot of the scratches from the 1K are already coming out. And this is a 5K Naniwa, by the way. All right, so. All right, that's about 25 strokes with, or laps with pressure. Now I'm going to switch up and I'm going to do some circles, some light circles, and then I'm going to finish with lighter circles, and then we'll move on to the 8K. All right, the stone's telling me she's done. It's pretty slow on the stone. Bevel is looking nice and shiny. And we'll do another check with the tomato, because I did kill that edge. Ooh, try not to do my thumb. And we're cutting the tomato up and down if you can't see. Here, I'll bring it here. Well, if I pay attention to the camera, maybe I'll cut it. There we go. Give it a few more strokes. Move on to the 8K. And this is the longest bevel set to 8K I've done in a while. And if you've made it this far into the video, why don't you go ahead and hit that like and that's a subscribe button. Leave a comment. I appreciate you guys watching. Very cool whenever I have some folks that have quite a bit more experience than I, especially in the JNats, come in and let me know what's up. I have been honing for probably about 5 or 6 years now. Probably honed several hundred razors by now. Like I said before, I'm by no means perfect at what I do. I got a pretty good idea what to do now. And I enjoy what I do. Typically I'm honing about 3 nights a week, maybe more, dependent. All right, move on to that 8K. And then we can move on to the Ozuko and the other JNats. By the way, that bevel is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it to you. Nice and shiny. Very shiny. Looking good. 8K should make quick work of it. Make sure there's nothing hanging out on top. All right, this should go really quick. I should be done here in just a few minutes. I lighten up all my pressure. You're going to see some streaks on the stone, and that's from my rolling X strokes. Trying to get that heel on that toe. See if I can adjust that light. There we go. The stone's really starting to give me a lot of feedback. It's slowing my razor down. It's wanting to jump around. I'm having to use just a hair of pressure to make sure that the apex stays in contact with the blade, or with the stone. That's how I know I'm getting really close to being done. I'm feeling it needs just a hair more for the heel. So I'm just trying to focus on the heel, and it's just now, it's just now getting there. I'm feeling good, quote-unquote, stiction up and down the blade. I'll give it a little bit more water, maybe 10 or 15 more laps, and we'll be done. It might be more than what some of you guys do, but it's what's works for me. All right. Yeah, we're done. It's very slow now. Awesome. So, looking at the bevel, there's a few scratches, just a few little light ones, very few. Sure, if I pull out the loop, confirm it's pretty straight, clean bevel. And nice and shiny, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the Azuko can do to it. Sure, it's going to make it pretty. This will be the first razor that I have, the first Sheffield razor that I've taken to a Japanese stone. So before I've only used Zollingen and Swedish steel, as far as I can think. Nope, and the Philharmonica. I've used Swedish, German, and Spanish, and this will be my English. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining me, guys. I'll catch you in the next video. So it'll be part 2 of, I would assume saying bevel set to 8K, or part 2 of honing a George Butler razor. I think that's what I'll call it. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for joining me, guys. Have a great night.